Remember this beautiful piece cut from a fallen trunk of an elephant ear tree? I finally made it to come up with a gorgeous project for it. I made the top look like glass by adding resin. I also attached a leather handle to give it a more elevated look. Do you want one too? Follow me and lass uns anfangen.
There's dirt on my hands, strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand.
As a first step, I had to clean up the piece to make it level. I had cut the lumber using a chainsaw in the past, and it was a pretty rough cut, but I have just the right solution to get the wood nice and level. I used my recently built router sled. This will make leveling the surface super easy. In case you missed the build, I will link the video in the description below. You might want to build it too once you find out how simple and affordable the build was. Always make sure the router is turned off before plugging it in. I speak out of experience here. I moved the router back and forth. It glides super easy on the rails. Make sure to only go little by little and don't take off too much at once. This might damage the lumber by chipping or burning it. It took me 2 paths to get the lumber leveled. Then I flipped the piece over and flattened the other side. As I built the router sled, I did not build an assistant to attach a vacuum cleaner to it, so that means I always make a big mess. But it's easily cleaned up. For the amount of wood chip it produces, I would have to build a bigger dust extractor system to make it worth it. But I just don't have the space for all that in my small workshop. So the cleanup will do. Now the piece needed a quick sand and I needed to clean up the bark a bit. So I worked on that next. I used 120 grit sandpaper just to sand off any fine lines the router bit left. And like always, let's have some fun with it. With the help of a chisel, I was able to remove most of the larger pieces of bark that I wanted off. I did want to keep the natural look of the edges, so I only removed the pieces that were loose or just not visually pleasing. Using a metal brush is very helpful as well. Then I used a sander to smoothen the surface just a bit more, to get it ready for the resin pour. Once the piece was ready for the resin pour, I took it into my crafts room. And of course I took duct tape to tape off any holes, especially the ones that I could already tell that go all the way through. One thing we do not want is the resin to just leak out. Resin is not cheap, so we don't want to waste it. So make sure all the holes are properly taped off. I don't like to pour the resin in my workshop because it's always very dusty in there, and dust will settle on top of the freshly poured resin and mess with the finish. So I like to take it into another room that's somewhat dust-free. I mean, there is no such thing as dust-free, but it's definitely more controlled. Like always, I'm using total wood resin. Make sure you wear a respirator or work in a well-ventilated area. Usually I work with the 1:1 ratio resin. This time I worked with a different one. This one is 3:1 ratio. Make sure you measure it correctly. And then mix, mix, mix. One way to make sure you mix it enough is to put on your favorite song and mix it as long as the song plays. Now, don't pick a song like Bohemian Rhapsody or something like that that's 6 minutes long. Just an average song will do. Once the resin was properly mixed, I poured it all over the wood piece. I picked this 3:1 ratio resin because I knew that it's very liquidy compared to the regular tabletop resin I usually use. I wanted to make sure that the wood sucks in the resin to fill up any of the pores. You will notice that this pour does not have a smooth finish at all. It's very bumpy, and it's supposed to be like that because this resin pour will have multiple pours. Right now, the first pour is just about filling in any of the gaps. I let the resin dry to a little bit past of a tacky consistency, then I poured a second layer. Once that layer had fully dried, I took the piece back to my router sled to remove the tuck tape and any of the drips on the bottom side. This gets the bottom side ready for its resin pour. Since most of the resin has leaked all the way through, you might be able to finish the bottom side with just one single resin pour. Make sure you don't use too much resin since you don't want the resin to overflow and leak down the sides. You do not want any driplets on the other side. Before I pour the resin over the bottom side, I made sure to give the top side one more sand to roughen up the surface and get it ready for its top coat. The top coat does look pretty decent right now, but I'm not 100% happy, so I will do one more coat. And now it's resin time. Since we already know how that looks like, I will skip this step and just move forward and show you the end result. And ta-da! If it were always just this easy, huh? The top is the final coat now, so be very careful handling this one. You do not want to end up with any scratches on it. For the bottom, I got a few drips I need to remove. Also, I like to sand the bottom to get a matte look to it. There is no need for it to be shiny. Don't make the mistake of flipping the piece onto its top side while sanding. Even when using a towel underneath, there are ways to scratch it, especially when the resin is only a few days old. I turned the piece to its side while using a towel to support the edge. The resin dust will get stuck in your sanding disc even with the best dust extractor attached to it, so stop every once in a while to remove the dust. This is best done while using a metal brush. If you don't unclog the sanding disc, it will not sand properly anymore and might even leave some additional scratches. The piece is nice and shiny on top and has a matte look to the bottom. You don't need to go crazy sanding on the bottom side, since once you apply the finish, it will hide any of the fine scratches. Here's another closer look of the top surface. Usually I prefer the matte look and feel of resin, but for this piece I think the shiny look really elevates it. I wanted to add a fine detail and thought of adding a leather strap on the side that can be used not only as a decorative detail but also as a handle. Always make sure you pre-drill your holes first. The hardware I'm using came with the leather strap that I ordered from Amazon. I will add the link in the description below if you'd like to check them out. I have previously used the same leather straps for projects in the past and really liked them. I also added some feet to the bottom. And then I applied the finish. I was debating on what kind of finish to use best and I decided on a coat of furniture wax. I rubbed in a fine layer, let it dry for about 10 minutes and then came back to buff it. Don't worry, it will be back to shiny after buffing out the top. And we are fertig! Wow, what a project! Turning the piece makes it look like something. Can you think of it? Let me know in the comments what you think that piece resembles. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe. Also, if you can, please join my Patreon. This helps me create more YouTube videos. See you next Friday. Tschüss und auf Wiedersehen.